Hey everyone. Tonight we're taking a trip somewhere darker than the coffee at your last mandatory HR meeting. Straight into the polished, pastel world of the 1950s American family. You know the one. Gleaming Chevrolets in the driveway, canned ham on the table, and kids named Skip or Debbie running across lawns trimmed as neatly as the family secrets. It's the decade where everything sparkled on the surface, and everyone was just a little bit afraid of their own toaster. So, before you sink into that warm bath of nuclear family nostalgia, hit like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy hearing someone lovingly roast your grandparents' so-called golden age. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from, dim the lights, and turn on a fan for that classic background hum of existential dread. Now, settle in. Preferably on a couch that's slightly too short for your legs, surrounded by furniture that smells faintly of cigarette smoke and generational trauma. Let's ask the real questions. Did June Cleaver really vacuum in pearls? Or was that just her coping mechanism for gelatin-based horrors? How much spam is too much spam? Did dads actually grill every meal? Or was that their excuse to avoid talking about emotions? And seriously, why did anyone trust Jell-O that much? Could you survive on casseroles, cigarettes, and blind faith in government pamphlets? And how much of that relentless smiling was just low-level carbon monoxide poisoning from the basement heater? Congratulations. You've officially woken up in the suburbs of 1957. Welcome home. There's linoleum under your feet, Wonder Bread in the pantry, and your neighbor's hedges are trimmed so straight they'd make a Marine drill sergeant cry. The TV is playing something wholesome. You have strong opinions about margarine. And surprise, your true feelings are never ever spoken out loud. Good luck. The sun rises, the coffee percolates, and your MO. There's wearing lipstick before 7 a.m., just in case the postman arrives. Breakfast isn't just a meal. It's a pageant. Orange juice from a can. Eggs scrambled to the consistency of insulation foam and bacon fried until it's roughly as flexible as a parking ticket. You're not just fueling up. You're rehearsing for serial commercial. Nobody asked for. Let's set the scene. The kitchen is gleaming thanks to your mother's pre-dawn battle with the countertop. Everything is pastel. The clock on the wall ticks with a pleasant urgency, reminding you that punctuality is just another way to prove your moral superiority. Outside, the grass is already dewy, and inside, there's a soundtrack of clinking silverware, low radio static, and a gentle hiss of a percolator that sounds suspiciously like a gear counter. You sit at the table in your pajamas, plaid if you're lucky, something hand-me-down if you're not, and immediately get the feeling that you're being evaluated for table manners, nutritional enthusiasm, and posture. The food itself is ambitious. There's always a bowl of fresh fruit, which means bananas that have known better days, and an apple with one side waxed to high shine. Toast arrives pre-buttered and cut into triangles, as if geometry could somehow improve its flavor. And then there's the cereal. Not the granola and oat milk kind you pretend to like today, but vintage 1950 sugar bombs. These are poured from a box decorated with a cartoon character whose main job is to get you addicted to marshmallows before third grade. Milk is poured, occasionally spilling onto the plastic tablecloth that feels more like a raincoat than fabric. There's a pecking order to the seating. Dad, if present, occupies the head of the table, scanning the newspaper as if he's about to be quizzed on the Dow Jones. Kids line up in order of age and emotional stability, each one angling for the best, reach toward the butter dish. And then there's Mom moving constantly, checking toast, refilling juice, and reciting reminders about shoes, lunch money, and how nice it would be if someone, anyone, put their dirty socks in a hamper for once in their life. Let's talk about beverages. Orange juice comes from a can, a syrupy concentrate mixed with water, and optimism. Coffee is strong enough to wake the dead, poured black for the adults, and politely suggested as off-limits for children. If you're lucky, you get milk. If you're unlucky, you get something called posum, which tastes like burnt hope and is allegedly good for you. Every moment is ritualized. You're expected to say please and thank you, to keep your elbows off the table, and to only speak when spoken to. If you complain about the eggs, you risk a lecture about children in Europe. If you linger over breakfast, you'll be hustled out the door with a lunchbox, and a reminder that the early bird catches the worm, as if worms are something to aspire to. And yet, for all the choreography, there's a sense of safety here. Like the world for a brief moment is exactly as it should be. The atomic clock is ticking, but the biggest threat you face right now is a lukewarm glass of Tang. There's no Instagram, no phones, just the distant promise of Saturday morning cartoons, and the certainty that tomorrow you'll do this all over again. Of course, the pageant ends as quickly as it began. Dad heads to work, kids scatter to buses, and Mom faces the debris like a one-woman cleanup crew. The kitchen returns to stillness. The only evidence of life, a stack of plates and the faint aroma of burnt toast. Breakfast atomic dawn, equal parts nourishment, performance, and a daily exercise in pretending everything is perfectly absolutely fine. Because in the 1950s, even your eggs came sunny side up, whether you asked for it or not. Welcome to the sacred schedule taped to the inside of every cabinet door. You'll learn there's a right time for vacuuming, a wrong time for resting your feet, and an entire philosophy of life based on the optimal shine of your kitchen linoleum. Being a 1950s housewife isn't a job. It's an endurance sport, and the only thing higher than the standards is your caffeine intake. Let's set the stage. It's AM. You just wave goodbye to the family, wearing an apron so crisp it could double as body armor. The clock starts ticking. Your day mapped out to the minute is a high-stakes game of walk, played with dust bunnies. Ring around the tub, and the existential dread of underperforming in the eyes of Mrs. Henderson next door. There's no room for improvisation. The schedule says polish the banister. So by all that is holy, that banister will sparkle even if you have to risk tennis elbow to get it done. First up is the morning sweep, a ballet of brooms and dustpans with bonus points for getting under the sofa without throwing out your back. Every crumb is a personal insult. Dust on the windowsill, a direct challenge from the universe. Next, you move to the kitchen where your sacred mission is to defeat last night's casserole residue with nothing but elbow grease and a cheerful hum. The radio plays softly in the background, Perry Como soothing the trauma of dried-on cheese. Vacuuming isn't just a chore, it's a performance. The vacuum cleaner is roughly the size and weight of a Buick. Its cord stretches exactly 12 and less than you need, and you must navigate around furniture that's heavier than your marriage vows. Vacuum tracks in the carpet are the day's most tangible accomplishment, like crop circles of domestic achievement, signaling to all who enter that you are not under any circumstances slacking off. But woe to the housewife who sits down before noon. There's no such thing as me time. Only time to polish, scrub, wipe, and possibly rearrange the canned goods alphabetically just to keep the cosmic order. If you're caught with your feet up when your husband or a neighbor drops by, the guilt hits harder than the coffee. Resting is a covert activity reserved for those rare moments when you can convincingly disguise it as checking the sewing basket for loose threads. Laundry day is an odyssey all its own. The washing machine is a modern marvel that shakes, rattles, and threatens to walk itself into the next room. Whites are separated from colors with military precision. Anything that comes out looking less than dazzling gets run through the ringer and hung on the line with a prayer to the gods of sunshine and breeze. Heaven help you if a bird flies by at the wrong moment. Then comes the midday rush. Sandwiches cut into perfect triangles. A quick sweep of the hallway and a phone call with a neighbor, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming bake sale, but mostly to assess whose child is most likely to end up in juvenile hall. You are a master multitasker, simultaneously ironing shirts, rest-arching curtains, and wondering what it would be like to have an actual adult conversation with another human being. Afternoon arrives with a flurry of light tidying, which is really just heavy cleaning in disguise. You dust the knickknacks, polish the silverware, and refluff the pillows, all while keeping one ear out for the unmistakable sound of children's feet thundering home from school. The day isn't over. It's just entering its most dangerous phase. Homework must be supervised, snacks distributed, and everyone's emotional stability maintained using only cookies and sheer force of will. As dinner hour approaches, you pivot to chef, setting the table with military precision, and launching into a new performance. Everything is under control. You whip up a casserole, check the jello, mold, and somehow remember to light a candle, so dinner feels just the right amount of fancy. And as the family sits down together, everyone believes, if only for a minute, that the world is perfectly ordered, thanks to the invisible labor of the woman who hasn't sat down since sunrise. The 1950s housewife, multitasker, miracle worker, and unacknowledged Olympic champion of the hourly itinerary. Every morning, Dad transforms, pressed slacks, silent resignation, and an aftershave so strong it could legally count as a pesticide. He slides into a car longer than a modern condo and merges into a river of identical Fords, all headed downtown to type, shuffle, and avoid thinking about their feelings for 8 hours straight. Let's step into his shoes for a moment, assuming you can find them under the neat line of size 11 wingtips by the front door. The day begins at a.m. Sharp to the dulcet shriek of an alarm clock built to withstand nuclear fallout. Dad rises like a reluctant ghost, quietly navigating the minefield of scattered toys and discarded socks, determined not to disturb the domestic tranquility before sunrise. The bathroom is occupied by Mom, so he waits his turn, reading the sports section in silence and mentally preparing for another day of dignified monotony. Once inside, the bathroom becomes his sanctuary. There's a strict ritual. Shave with a razor sharp enough to cut time, splash on enough Old Spice to stun a moose, and style hair into submission with a wet comb. Each movement is practiced as if he's being judged by an unseen panel of 1950s efficiency experts. He dresses in his work uniform, the gray flannel suit, not black, not navy, but the precise shade of mid-century compromise. The tie is conservative. The shoes are polished, and the briefcase is packed with the 3 sacred items of American business: a thermos of coffee, a bologna sandwich, and existential dread. Breakfast is a blur. Dad sits at the table, nodding politely while reading about the latest Cold War standoff, or why the Yankees will definitely win this year. He's handed a plate of eggs and toast by Mom. Never pancakes. Those are strictly for weekends when joy is briefly permitted. He mutters something supportive about the upcoming science fair project, folds the paper, and heads for the door. With a mechanical kiss on the cheek and a quick, "Don't forget your math homework," he disappears. Outside, the car awaits. A metallic land the size of a parade float, boasting real chrome, vinyl seats, and an ashtray that doubles as a glove box. The driveway is a gallery of conformity. Every house has a nearly identical vehicle, each a near-perfect clone of the next, distinguished only by minor variations in hat style or the volume of the horn. The ignition roars to life, and Dad pulls away, the radio playing the latest big band hit, or if he's feeling rebellious, the news. The commute itself is a kind of group meditation. You merge into a line of cars, so uniform you could swap them at a stoplight and no one would notice. Dad's face sets into that familiar mask. Focused, stoic, half listening to news about world affairs and half wondering if the guy in the next lane has a better pension plan. The drive downtown is both an escape and a sentence. 15 miles of tail fins, turn signals, and the slow realization that all the good parking spots are already taken by guys named Bob. Inside the car, the air is tinged with cigarette smoke and a hint of day-old coffee. The heater works when it feels like it, and the windows rattle just enough to remind you this is progress. He checks his reflection in the rear view mirror. Tie straight, jaw set, eyes already glazed over. You can practically feel his soul folding itself neatly into the glove compartment until quitting time. Arriving downtown, Dad parks in a lot that smells like hot tar and dashed hopes. He joins a herd of men in gray suits, each clutching the same briefcase, all marching into glass towers where their job is to blend in, get by, and not ask questions about the nature of fulfillment. For the next 8 hours, it's all fluorescent lights, endless memos, and the faint buzz of suppressed dreams. And then, at 5 on the dot, the process reverses. Dad collects his things, nods to the security guard, and embarks on the journey home. A little more wrinkled, a little more tired, and hoping tonight someone saved him a corner piece of meatloaf. Because in 1950s, that's just what you did. You commuted, you provided, and you made silence look easy. Children in the 1950s, clean, obedient, suspiciously shiny. You're expected to look like a Norman Rockwell painting, act like a future senator, and ideally, never ask any questions about the Cold War, your parents' marriage, or why everyone smells faintly of gin by dinner. Let's begin with the morning ritual. Your day starts early, sometimes before the sun, with a motherly inspection that would make a drill sergeant proud. Hair parted with military precision, tamed by a dab of something so sticky it's probably banned today. Ears scrubbed until they resemble polished ivory. Clothes starched, ironed, and always a little too formal for the level of chaos you're about to unleash. Shoes are shined, socks pulled so tight you're in mild danger of losing circulation. And there's a strong likelihood your shorts are being held up by suspenders against your will. Breakfast is a quiet affair. You're to eat with nice manners, which means no elbows on the table, no making faces at your sister, and absolutely no attempt to hide your peas in the folds of your napkin. Conversation is limited to safe pre-approved topics. Schoolwork, the weather, and how you're definitely not going to end up like Cousin Ronnie, who got sent home from summer camp for insubordination. If you slip and mention anything remotely controversial, you're met with the kind of silence that makes you wish you just passed the salt instead. The school day is its own performance. You walk, or if you're lucky, bike to a brick building filled with other children who are also pretending they don't have opinions. Teachers are not just educators. They're minor royalty to be addressed as sir or ma'am. You stand for the pledge. You sit when told, and you answer every question with a confidence you absolutely do not possess. If you're caught daydreaming, that's a one-way ticket to the front row, where the only thing louder than your heartbeat is the sound of your self-esteem deflating. Forget about expressing your individuality, unless your individuality involves reciting multiplication tables with perfect diction. Recess is the only time you're allowed to behave like an actual child. But even then, it's organized chaos. You play games with names like Red Rover and Dodgeball, pastimes that double as natural selection in gym shorts. If you skin your knee, the teacher hands you a Band-Aid and a speech about toughening up. Crying is strictly forbidden unless you want your nickname for the next 5 years to be Waterworks. After school, you're expected to come straight home. No loitering, no stopping at the malt shop, and definitely no fraternizing with the wrong crowd, which according to your parents is any child whose shirt isn't tucked in. Homework is done at the kitchen table under the watchful eye of a parent who's convinced that sloppy penmanship is the first sign of moral decline. There's a strong emphasis on respect. Respect your elders, respect authority, and above all, respect the upholstery. Woe to the child who leaves a fingerprint on the plastic-covered couch. Your evenings are choreographed, too. There's maybe half an hour of television, something wholesome and non-threatening, featuring dogs that rescue children and parents who never raise their voices. Afterward, you're sent to your room to read quietly, which is code for staring out the window and pondering the meaning of duck and cover drills. Bedtime comes early, pajamas are buttoned all the way up, and you fall asleep to the hum of distant conversation, never quite sure what the adults are laughing about in the other room. All this careful polishing isn't just for show, it's survival. In the 1950s, children who step out of line don't get a timeout. They get a lecture, a reputation, and sometimes a haircut so short you can see your thoughts. You are above all a reflection of your family, shiny, silent, and perpetually on display. And if you ever wondered what would happen if you actually spoke your mind, don't worry. The answer is always not in this house. Out here, the grass is not just grass. It's a battlefield. The neighborhood's true religion is lawn care. And every Saturday, you're drafted into mowing, raking, and battling dandelions like they personally insulted your ancestors. Your father inspects the results with the seriousness of a military tribunal. It's early morning. The sun hasn't even cleared the power lines, and already you can hear the distant rumble of lawnmowers. First one, then another until the whole street vibrates with the energy of men in plaid shirts, all engaged in synchronized suburban warfare. You wake to the sound, knowing that your own conscription is moments away. You put on yesterday's jeans, tie up your battered sneakers, and brace yourself for the great outdoors, where your father stands on the porch, arms crossed, surveying his domain like a general about to deliver a pre-battle speech. The tools of the trade are lined up in the garage, a rusty lawn mower, a rake with more bald spots than the family dog, and a bag of weed and feed chemicals that, based on their skull and crossbones label, are probably outlawed in 3 states today. The instructions are simple, but the expectations are impossible. Mow in straight lines. Crooked rows are the first sign of family decline. Rake every leaf, even the invisible ones. And if you see a dandelion, don't just pull it. Eradicate it with the righteous fury of someone defending the family name. Lawns are sacred, not for their beauty, but for what they represent. Order, decency, and a desperate need to keep up appearances. A patchy spot isn't just a patchy spot. It's a whispered scandal. A reason for Mrs. Kravitz across the street to look over her glasses and write a note for the next HOA meeting. The grass must be uniformly green, precisely trimmed, and free of anything that could be described as wildlife. Your neighbor's approval depends on it. It's not gardening. It's a Cold War with the Joneses fought with hedge clippers and passive aggression. Your father walks the perimeter, inspecting every edge, every blade, searching for signs of sabotage or worse, neglect. He teaches you the sacred geometry. Mow one way, then the other, creating a checkerboard pattern that, if done correctly, can be seen by passing airplanes and the eyes of God. There are lengthy debates about the best grass height, optimal watering schedules, and which fertilizer produces the most envy-inducing sheen. This is Kentucky bluegrass, son, he'll say, as if that should mean anything to a child who just wants to go inside and watch cartoons. The work is relentless. If it's not mowing, it's edging. If it's not edging, it's raking. Every Saturday, you collect bags and bags of leaves, only for more to fall the second you finish. Occasionally there's a crisis, a patch of crabgrass, a mole tunnel, or a rogue squirrel digging where no squirrel should. Your father treats these like national emergencies, deploying you and any available siblings to restore order. You begin to realize the yard waste bin is less about waste and more about banishing evidence of imperfection. Breaks are rare, but when you get them, you stand at the curb sipping lukewarm lemonade and silently compare your handiwork to your neighbors. If their lawn is greener, it's because they cheat, obviously, probably using a secret blend of Miracle Grow and dark magic. If yours is better, your father nods in approval. The closest thing to paternal affection you'll get until your next birthday. And when the work is finally done, the tools put away and the sun is high, there's a strange sense of accomplishment mixed with existential dread, because next Saturday, you'll do it all again. The sacred geometry never rests. You'll keep mowing, raking, and waging war on weeds in the never-ending quest for suburban perfection. After all, out here, A man's home is his castle, but his lawn is his legacy. It's mom's exhausted, and you're about to eat Salisbury steak out of an aluminum tray with the same excitement your ancestors reserved for Christmas. The TV flickers. Everyone sits in silence, and nobody speaks unless it's to complain about the peas. Let's be honest. This is no ordinary meal. This is progress delivered straight from the freezer aisle, wrapped in the shiny promise of modern convenience. The TV dinner, a marvel of mid-century science, arrives with a futuristic sizzle. 3 tiny compartments, one for meat, one for vegetable, and one for dessert, all separated by a wall of stamped aluminum as strong and impenetrable as family secrets. You peel back the foil with the care of an archaeologist uncovering a new tomb, greeted by the smell of instant gravy and the faint, reassuring tang of preservatives. Dinner is served directly on your lap atop a tray table, so wobbly it could qualify as a carnival ride. There's no need for plates, no argument over who gets stuck with dish duty, and absolutely no garnish unless you count the flecks of freezer burn. Your utensils are real metal, but the food is suspiciously uniform in color and texture. Every bite of mashed potato is a lesson in physics, somehow both fluffy and dense enough to anchor a small boat. The corn is arranged in perfect cubes, as if nature intended it for stacking, and the peas have been boiled into submission. The real star, of course, is the Salisbury steak, a patty of uncertain origin, smothered in a gravy that can be best described as vaguely brown and comfortingly salty. The TV takes pride of place, blaring the latest black and white sitcom. There's laughter from the screen, but none from the family. Speaking is discouraged unless it's to ask, "Can we turn up a volume?" Conversation, if it happens, is limited to heated debates about the proper way to eat a brownie square with a fork, or whether tonight's episode of Dragnet will feature a real criminal or just another stern lecture about moral hygiene. You're told that this is the future: food, entertainment, and family, all wrapped up in a single efficient ritual. In theory, it's supposed to bring everyone together. In reality, it's the perfect excuse for everyone to stare straight ahead and avoid eye contact for 20 blissful gravy-soaked minutes. If you drop something on the carpet, it's quietly ignored. There's no room in the 1950s for dinner stains or emotional vulnerability. For Mom, the TV dinner is a small mercy, a pause in the never-ending kitchen gauntlet. No peeling, no boiling, no stirring until her wrist aches. She can finally sit down, put her feet up, and enjoy the luxury of pre-made pudding, all while the kids fight over the drumstick on the Mickey Mouse Club. Dad pretends not to notice when you feed your Lamima beans to the dog, who is now officially part of the Clean Plate Club. Yet even this shining symbol of American ingenuity has rules. You must finish every bite. Waste is a sin, and hunger is always just one missed paycheck away. If you leave a trace of mashed potato, you're gently reminded of the starving children in Europe. A geographical guilt trip that somehow doesn't work on the dog. Once everyone's trays are empty, the evidence is quickly cleared, stacked, and ready to be washed, or in some cases just tossed away. Because nothing says progress like disposable dinnerware. As the credits roll and the commercials hawk even more convenient foods, you're struck by the strange glamour of it all. Dinner isn't an event, it's a show, a performance of family life that happens in comfortable silence, illuminated by the soft blue glow of the cathode ray tube. You don't realize it yet, but someday you'll miss these moments. The simplicity, the predictability, the way TV dinners made everyone feel, just for a little while, like they were living in the future. And if you're lucky, maybe next time you'll get the meal with the cherry cobbler instead of the square of dessert so mysterious it could pass for insulation. In the meantime, you pass your tray to Mom. Thank her in a voice barely louder than the static, and head off to brush your teeth, still tasting the faint metallic tang of nostalgia. Prescription pills are new, modern, and handed out with a smile. Whether it's to smooth the edges of a 16-hour day or just to survive another round of bridge club. You learn that the best coping mechanism for suburban monotony comes with a childproof cap and a vague warning label. Let's step into the sensible house shoes of a 1950s suburban mom. The calendar says it's Thursday, but the exhaustion in your bones claims it's at least next Tuesday. The day begins with a symphony of alarm clocks, burnt toast, and the sound of small children weaponizing cereal across the kitchen. By AM, you've already vacuumed the living room, settled 3 minor sibling disputes, and written a check for the PDA fundraiser you never volunteered for. You haven't sat down, but you have ironed 5 shirts and answered the phone twice, once for a telemarketer and once for your neighbor, who is inexplicably furious about your hydrangeas. It's no wonder that by noon you find yourself at the kitchen counter contemplating the pastel plastic bottle your doctor handed over at your last checkup. Nursey called it a touch of fatigue, not depression, certainly not anxiety. The idea that you might need rest or a real conversation is quaint. Instead, the modern solution comes from the pharmacy. A small oblong tablet designed to take the edge off the endless parade of chores, judgments, and existential questions about the meaning of pot roast. The commercials promised you'd feel like yourself again, except of course better. There's a pill for nerves, a pill for headaches, a pill for sleep, and sometimes all 3 come in a sampler pack, like a box of chocolates with slightly more side effects. The warning labels are charmingly vague, may cause drowsiness, not for use while operating heavy machinery, and do not take more than 6 at once, which is alarming, mainly because nobody ever explains what happens if you do. After lunch, the ritual resumes. The pills live in the kitchen next to the flour and the salt, so you don't forget. They're shared between friends at bridge club, where everyone talks about their husband's golf games and nobody ever mentions feeling overwhelmed. It's just one for energy, one for focus, one for getting through the day with your dignity barely intact. Sometimes you catch yourself watching the sunlight filter through the curtains and wondering if there's a pill for feeling less alone. You laugh it off and take another just to be sure. The children return from school hungry and loud, and you greet them with a smile that's been reheated more times than last night's casserole. You help with homework, negotiate peace treaties between siblings, and make sure everyone is washed and presentable for dinner. If you catch your reflection in the oven door, you notice you're smiling, though you're not sure why or for whom. Evening is when the world slows down just enough for you to notice how tired you really are. You gather with neighbors for a cocktail or 2, discussing everything except the things you really want to say. Someone mentions a new brand of tranquilizer, and everyone leans in, not too close, but just enough to hear if it's stronger, gentler, or at least comes in a prettier color. You all laugh. Nobody asks if you're happy. They ask if you're managing. And so the day ends. The bottle is tucked back into its hiding place, and you move through the house, checking locks and turning off lights. Your thoughts softened at the edges. It's quiet, safe, and almost peaceful. You lay in bed, listening to your husband's soft snoring, your mind gently floating somewhere between sleep and the memory of who you were before everything became so beautifully, silently overwhelming. In the end, you're grateful for modern medicine, not because it fixes anything, but because it lets you get through another day. In the 1950s, happiness is just a pill, or at least that's what everyone says. Every evening, the family sits down for a civilized meal, a tactical exercise in not mentioning politics, money, or Aunt Ruth's 3rd divorce. You pass the potatoes. You say, "Thank you." And if someone brings up feelings, you pivot to weather faster than a news anchor in a tornado. Let's set the table. It's PM sharp. The good china, reserved for holidays and Tuesdays when mom's feeling optimistic, is laid out in careful symmetry. There's a roast of ambiguous origin, mashed potatoes whipped to the consistency of spackle, and green beans boiled until their only remaining flavor is regret. At the center, a Jell-O salad glistens with menace, containing fruits and sometimes vegetables, suspended in a translucent force field. Water glasses are filled, napkins folded into triangles, and the air hums with the quiet dread of potential conversational landmines. You take your seat and immediately notice the unspoken rules at play. No elbows on the table, no hats indoors, and for the love of all that is pro-son, holy, no slouching. Dinner begins with a brief moment of grace, blessing the food, the family, and if the prayer runs long, your ability to maintain composure while the meatloaf steams quietly. Dad carves the roast with the solemnity of a Supreme Court justice, distributing slices as if they were classified documents. Mom orchestrates the sides, herding beans, ladelling gravy, and offering up that faint warning smile that says, "Not tonight," to any child thinking of starting trouble. The meal itself is less about eating and more about strategic navigation. The topics on offer are bland, but safe. How was school? Did you finish your homework? Did anyone notice the new curtains? If you attempt to veer into unapproved territory, say asking about the price of gasoline or what Red Scare actually means, you're met with a pointed silence and a quick change of subject to the forecast or Little League scores. This is not a democracy. This is international diplomacy conducted with silverware and a firm handshake. Every child knows there are hot-button issues best left untouched. Mentioning Aunt Ruth's new friend or Uncle Dave's mysterious job loss is the conversational equivalent of tossing a lit match into a fireworks factory. Instead, you focus on safe ground. Compliment the potatoes. Ask for more bread. Tell a story from school, but make sure it ends well. Emotions are to be contained, optimism rationed, and any negative feelings are best directed into an extra helping of dessert. Occasionally, someone forgets the script. Maybe a sibling complains about gym class, or dad mentions a rumor at work. Suddenly, the temperature drops. Spoons freeze halfway to mouths. Mom steps in, her voice cheery and bright. "Isn't it supposed to rain tomorrow?" And just like that, the storm is averted. Everyone resumes chewing, pretending not to notice the near miss. The food is hearty, if not particularly thrilling. There's a comforting monotony to it. You know what's coming. You know what's expected. And you know that if you keep your head down and finish your beans, you'll survive to eat another day. Occasionally, Mom tries a new recipe she clipped from a magazine. Something continental involving canned pineapple or cream of mushroom soup. Reviews are muted. Complaints are unwise. The unwritten rule is gratitude expressed with a smile, a clean plate, and the enthusiastic passing of the salt. As dinner winds down, dessert appears, a wedge of pie, or maybe one of those cookies with a mysterious red dot in the center. You eat in silence, the tension from earlier dissolving into the familiar sugar haze. There's a sense of relief as everyone begins to clear the table, stacking plates and scraping leftovers in a Tupperware for tomorrow's lunch. The performance is over. The diplomats retire to their respective corners. Dad to his armchair, Mom to the kitchen, children to homework or television. You survived another meal, another round of dinner table. Diplomacy where nothing important is ever said, but everything meaningful is understood. In the 1950s, that counts as a successful summit. Gelatin. It's not just dessert. In the 1950s, anything, tuna, carrots, olives could end up suspended in a quivering tower of translucent goo. Eating dinner is less about nutrition and more about surviving culinary science experiments your mother learned from the back of a box. Let's enter the kitchen laboratory where the real magic and terror begins. On the counter, packets of flavored gelatin are stacked with a reverence usually reserved for holy relics. The instructions are read aloud, then reinterpreted by Mom with a confidence only seen in mad scientists and high-stakes gamblers. She's on a mission to create a dish that both impresses the neighbors and mystifies the digestive tract. You watch in awe as she empties boiling water into a mixing bowl, followed by mysterious powders and neon hues not found in nature. The kitchen smells like a chemical spill at a candy factory. Next come the addends. Logic, taste, and the laws of God and man are abandoned as canned pineapple, chopped celery, shredded carrots, and if company's coming, miniature marshmallows are folded in with grim determination. Sometimes she gets creative. A can of tuna, green olives, or on one truly memorable occasion, Vienna sausages. The boundary between dessert and dinner dissolves. The only certainty is that everything will jiggle. The resulting creation is poured into a mold shaped like a ring, a fish, or the ever-popular butt. Because nothing says bon appetit like food with its own architectural ambitions. The gelatin sets in the fridge, quietly humming with anticipation. Hours later, it emerges, glossy, wobbling, and glistening under the kitchen's fluorescent lights. A technical trophy of postwar optimism, serving as its own ritual. The Jell-O is appended onto a plate and garnished with a sprig of parsley, as if this will distract from the horror lurking within. Slices are served with a smile and a point. Be sure to get some of the peas and ham, too. Guests are required to marvel. Children are expected to be polite, and everyone quickly learns that in this house, you don't ask questions about what's inside the Jell-O. You just eat and hope for the best. The first bite is always a gamble. There's a cold, slippery texture, the crunch of something unexpected, and the faint, lingering flavor of defeat. The dish surmises on the fork, mocking you with its refusal to maintain structural integrity. If you're lucky, it's mostly fruit and marshmallow, a sweet, slightly disturbing snack. If you're unlucky, you're chewing through pimentos and canned fish, trying not to make eye contact with anyone at the table. Still, there's something undeniably captivating about Jell-O's hold on the American imagination. It's a symbol of modernity, of progress, of the unspoken suburban dare. What won't we suspend in gelatin? Every new recipe is a flex. Your mother, a culinary pioneer, bravely charting the unknown territory between salad and science fiction. Guests bring their own creations to potlucks, turning the buffet into a neon-lit gallery of edible oddities. Behind every shimmering dome, there's the underlying challenge. Can you top this? And yet, for all its strange, the Jell-O mold endures. Kids poke at it. Adults pretend to enjoy it. And every leftover slice is ceremoniously covered with plastic wrap and stored in the fridge, just in case someone gets hungry for mystery at midnight. Recipes are clipped from magazines and tucked in cookbooks, passed down like family secrets, each one a little weirder than the last. By the time dinner is over, the Jell-O has melted slightly, leaving behind a puddle of green or orange evidence. You scrape your plate, say thank you, and wonder, not for the first time, if people in other decades will ever believe what you just survived. In the 1950s, the Jell-O paradox reigned supreme. Not quite food, not quite art, and always just a little too wobbly to trust. Plastic containers arrive, and suddenly leftovers are a lifestyle. Your mother attends Tupperware parties with cult-like devotion, practicing the burp seal until it's muscle memory. You don't understand why, but you know these pastel containers will outlast humanity. Let's open the cabinet above the fridge slowly, lest an avalanche of lids comes tumbling down. Here lies the treasure trove of 1950s domestic achievement. Tupperware in shades of mint green, apricot, and a pink so assertive it could legally qualify as a traffic hazard. These containers aren't just for storing food. They are family heirlooms, investment pieces, and the physical embodiment of just in case. Your mom has enough to pack a small army's worth of potato salad, plus a secret stash of replacement lids that have never in recorded history matched a base on the first try. You quickly realize that Tupperware isn't just a product, it's a movement. The Tupperware party is the suburban woman's social event of the season. The invitations arrive with a flourish. There's talk of games, prizes, and most importantly, the chance to watch the hostess demonstrate the legendary burp seal. This is not a casual gathering. This is an initiation. In the living room, plastic bowls are stacked like a pastel Stonehenge. The air smells faintly of instant coffee and ambition. You watch as your mother and her friends gather around, eyes sparkling, ready to witness magic. A soft push, a gentle tug, a faint burp, and suddenly leftovers are safe from the twin horrors of air and time. You'd think the secret of happiness in the 1950s was found in therapy or meditation, but no, it's Tupperware. The sense of accomplishment when you successfully seal the lid and hear that delicate burp is like a chef's kiss. That sound is a badge of honor, a sign that you're doing your part to uphold the sacred order of leftovers. Forget marriage proposals. The most romantic words in the house are, "I burped the Jell-O mold." The sales pitch is as much about hope as it is about plastic. Tupperware, you're told, will save you time, money, and the embarrassment of your potato salad drying out before the next church picnic. Moms become entrepreneurial icons, earning commissions and tiny trophies shaped like tumblers. For a brief, shining moment, women are their own bosses, at least until dinner needs reheating. Some mothers start their own downline, teaching the next generation how to stack, nest, and never, ever lose a lid. The catalog is practically scripture with glossy pages promising eternal freshness and a kitchen free of cling wrap shame. In your own household, Tupperware becomes a source of low-stakes drama. Someone always leaves a container at a neighbor's barbecue. The search for matching lids rivals the hunt for the Holy Grail. If a prize piece goes missing, say the celery keeper or the deviled egg tray, a subtle tension descends and side eyes are exchanged at church functions. Returning borrowed Tupperware is a delicate diplomatic mission, best handled with a plate of brownies as an offering of peace. Every leftover has its place. Sunday roast gel. Oh, salad. The mysterious casserole that no one will ever admit to liking. Even the smallest scrap of food gets its own airtight crypt, doomed to be forgotten at the back of the fridge until rediscovered, fossilized and noble. Months later, you learn early that plastic outlives everything. Meals, marriages, even memories. The bottom of the vegetable drawer is a museum of Tupperware anthropology. And so the cult of the burping lid endures. The containers stack, the parties roll on, and the promise of freshness never dies. In a world spinning with change and atomic anxiety, your mom finds comfort in the little things. A pastel tower, a familiar pop, and the faith that if civilization collapses, at least the leftovers will survive. You're dressed in starched collars, sensible shoes, and enough hair gel to glue a small animal to the wall. Meanwhile, the kitchen sparkles with chrome and formica. Every surface easy to wipe, but impossible to emotionally connect with. Everything is clean, but nothing is truly comfortable. Let's take a closer look at your daily uniform, shall we? Getting ready in the 1950s isn't a matter of throwing something on. It's an Olympic event. Your mother lays out your clothes with military precision. Shirts are ironed so stiff you could use them as a serving tray. If you're a boy, you're squeezed into slacks with razor-sharp creases. A belt cinched tight enough to qualify as a corset, and shoes polished until you can see your anxious little face reflected in them. Girls get dresses with petticoats, hair ribbons, and an unspoken mandate to avoid mud at all costs. Everything must match, and everything must look presentable, which is parental code for ready to greet a parade of unexpected neighbors and at least 3 church elders. And then the hair. Hair is serious business. Brill cream and dip-it-a-do gel are the weapons of choice, transforming even the wildest cowlick into a gleaming helmet of respectability. A stray lock is a moral failing. Girls submit to curlers and bobby pins overnight, waking up with a neck cramp and hair as rigid as national policy. For the truly fashionable, a spritz of Aquanet finishes the look and possibly coats your lungs. It's not just about looking good. It's about reassuring everyone in the vicinity that order still exists, even as the world feels increasingly unpredictable. Meanwhile, The rest of the house is performing the same high-wire act, especially in the kitchen. 4 mica countertops, usually in shades of turquoise, coral, or atomic yellow, reflect the optimism of the era. There's chrome on every handle, edge, and appliance gleaming under fluorescent lights with a chill that even hot coffee can't warm. The kitchen table is a slab of color-reflective plastic that could survive a nuclear blast and doubles as a landing pad for any emotional distress you accidentally spill. There's a place for everything, and everything is in its place, including your sense of comfort, which has been safely packed away until the children move out. Comfort, you quickly realize, is not the goal here. It's about presentation, efficiency, and the faint constant anxiety of being caught off guard by company. You sit upright, napkin in your lap, knees pressed together, always ready for the doorbell. Even the living room, plastic slipcovers. Anyone reminds you that relaxing too much could lead to wrinkled pants or worse, social shame. Every seat is just soft enough to encourage a visit, but firm enough to remind you not to overstay your welcome. Outside the home, fashion is another minefield. School is a parade of pleated skirts, button-downs, and cardigans so thick you could repel a minor hailstorm. Nobody dares show up in play clothes, not even on field day. Shoes are polished, hair combed, and if you forget your handkerchief, prepare for a lecture about germs and the moral downfall of Western civilization. Even trips to the grocery store are a fashion show, complete with hats and gloves and weather that would make a polar bear sweat. The rules are clear and everywhere. Be tidy, be presentable, be respectable. But after a long day encased in starch, gel, and shiny synthetic optimism, you peel off the uniform and trade it for pajamas that are almost comfortable, provided nobody knocks on the door after p.m. The legacy of the era's style lingers. Photos of perfectly pressed families, kitchens so clean you could eat off the ceiling, and children who look like they were produced on an assembly line. But the truth, everyone was just a little bit itchy, a little bit nervous, and deeply comically committed to looking like they had it all together, even if it took 3 layers of hairspray, a fresh coat of wax on the countertops, and a smile that could survive the next atomic test. Downstairs, next to the washing machine, you have a fallout shelter, or at least a vague plan involving beans, a transistor radio, and the hope that the Soviets take weekends off. Duck and cover drills are as common as after-school snacks. Let's head down the creaky steps into the chilly concrete sanctuary known as the basement. The place smells like detergent, cardboard, and the nervous sweat of someone who's read too many government pamphlets. In the corner sits a battered metal shelf, groaning under the weight of canned food your mom bought just in case. Though the only emergency it's ever faced is a rogue mouse or your father's sudden craving for baked beans at midnight. Here's where the family's Cold War anxiety is carefully organized into neat stacks. Spam, dinty, more stew, and canned peaches with expiration dates that will long outlast civilization as we know it. The shelter is less of a bunker and more of a heavily decorated laundry nook with vague promises of safety. If you're lucky, there's a folding cot or two, a first aid kit with ancient Band-Aids, and a dusty jug of water you're not supposed to drink unless you want to glow in the dark. For the children, the fallout shelter is both fortress and forbidden zone. You sneak down there with a flashlight, convinced you'll find secret government files, or at the very least a lost Monopoly piece. You stage your own spy dramas, turning stacks of toilet paper into barricades and pretending the old paint cans are uranium. The family cat, always one step ahead of disaster, refuses to set port anywhere near the bomb shelter corner, which frankly should be your first clue. The backdrop to all this is a steady drum beat of duck and cover drills, taught by teachers with nerves of steel and a secret fondness for melodrama. At school, you're told that a wooden desk will protect you from nuclear blasts, provided you keep your eyes closed and your hands on your head like a turtle with a mortgage. Back home, your parents pore over government-issued manuals full of cheerful illustrations showing how to turn your basement into a post-apocalyptic Airbnb. The illustrations always include a smiling family, a tidy shelf of canned soup, and no mention of what happens after the canned soup runs out. On TV, public service announcements remind you that civil defense is everyone's job, and then cut to footage of children putting on gas masks with the same seriousness reserved for donning raincoats. Your father sometimes tests the emergency radio, spinning the dial between weather alerts and Elvis songs just to make sure the family can be serenitated while the world ends outside. And yet, for all the dread, there's an odd sort of optimism. The shelter becomes a family project. Mom labels everything. Dad invents elaborate escape plans involving the dry event. And you practice emergency meals that taste suspiciously like normal Thursday dinners. Only colder family meetings are held where everyone listens to Dad's instructions and immediately forgets half of them. Someone always brings up the dog, and you're all quietly relieved. Nobody's figured out what to do with the goldfish. Eventually, the shelter becomes less about disaster and more about storage. The extra Christmas lights live down here along with ancient board games and a pile of National Geographics that might be the only real backup plan. But the sense of vigilance never quite goes away. Whenever the air raid siren wails during a test, everyone freezes, listening, waiting, hearts thumping until it stops and life resumes its careful, orderly chaos. So, you climb back upstairs a little chilled, maybe a little comforted, and you wonder if the real fallout shelter was the reassurance you felt knowing your parents were doing their best, however odd, however outdated, to keep you safe. In the 1950s, the Cold War wasn't just in the headlines. It was right there in your basement, between the laundry soap and the beans, humming with hope and fear, and the lingering scent of canned peaches. Sunday is for religion and showing off your new hat. Everyone files into the local church where sermons are about as spicy as a plain boiled potato. And the real competition is in the parking lot counting whose Oldsmobile is shiniest. Let's be honest, Sunday morning in the 1950s isn't just about saving your soul. It's about staging a highly coordinated, mildly anxious social pageant in full Technicolor. The day begins at sunrise, not with a gentle hymn, but with the thunder of your mother storming the halls, demanding that everyone brush their teeth, polish their shoes, and get into their Sunday best before the coffee pot is empty. The family's collective appearance is not just a reflection of personal virtue, but a declaration of family, standing in the community, pressed, starched, and if Mom has anything to say about it, smudge-free. Your outfit has been chosen days in advance, ironed to within an inch of its life, and laid out like a sacrificial lamb on the bed. Boys are encased in miniature suits and clip-on ties that strangle you with the twin forces of fashion and expectation. Girls wear dresses with petticoats and ribbons so starched that even a light breeze could slice bread. Hats are mandatory. For women, the bigger the better, preferably adorned with feathers or faux fruit, because nothing says piety like a pineapple on your head. Gloves are non-negotiable. White for purity, of course, and for the subtle flex of not having to do the dishes until Monday. The drive to church is a rolling display of suburban pride. Every family piles into their biggest, shiniest car and proceeds in a solemn convoy down Main Street. Your father becomes a Formula One driver in a fedora, gripping the wheel as if eternal salvation depends on finding a good parking spot. Once you arrive, the real event begins. The great parking lot parade. Kids are told to stand up straight and smile, but not too much. You're forbidden from touching any surface with your freshly shined shoes. Neighbors exchange greetings disguised as compliments. My, your Eela's are coming in nicely this year, aren't they? And the unspoken competition for best dressed, best behaved, and best polished car is in full swing. Inside the church, pews fill up with a hush that's equal parts reverence and tactical seating strategy. The sermon is delivered by a pastor with a voice so gentle it could put a pot roast to sleep. The lessons are straightforward. Be kind. Help your neighbor. And if you absolutely must gossip, do it with a prayerful heart. Children fidget and count ceiling tiles. Adults exchange discreet glances, telepathically, wagering how long the blonde service will go before the organist strikes up bringing in the sheave. The real sinners, it is rumored, are those who sneak a peppermint from their purse before the final hymn. The collection plate comes around, gleaming with the fingerprints of 100 anxious hands. You drop in a nickel and try not to look guilty about stealing an extra donut hole from the fellowship table last week. Afterward, there's coffee and cookies in the church basement where men debate lawn care, women compare cake recipes, and children plan an epic game of tag between the folding chairs. The hat parade resumes as everyone files out, nodding with just the right amount of piety and relief. The parking lot is one last gauntlet. Whose car starts on the first try? Whose child manages not to spill grape juice on their Sunday whites? Whose pie will be the first to vanish at the afternoon picnic? By the time you're back home, you've survived both the sermon and the social Olympics, ready to collapse into your afterwards clothes. If you're lucky, blue jeans and socks with holes. In the 1950s, Sunday wasn't just the Sabbath. It was a full-contact sport, equal parts devotion, fashion show, and low-stakes suburban battleground. You may not remember the scripture, but you'll always remember the hats, the handshake competition, and the way the sunlight bounced off Dad's freshly waxed Oldsmobile, gleaming like a promise that at least for today, you and your family truly belonged. School isn't just for kids. It's a battleground for mothers armed with casseroles and questionable opinions. If you want to survive, you'll need to master the subtle politics of bake sales, gossip, and the silent war over who gets to organize the spring pageant. Let's set the scene. It's Tuesday night. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead in the elementary school cafeteria. The air is thick with anticipation, anxiety, and the unmistakable aroma of slightly overbaked snickerdoodles. Mothers arrive in formation, wielding Pyrex dishes and clipboards, ready to do battle not for grades, but for glory, best casserole, most festive tablecloth, and above all, supreme control of the fundraising calendar. The PTA meeting is both democracy and monarchy. There's a president, always the most assertively cheerful mom in town, who can summon quiet with a single clap and has never lost a raffle in her life. There's the secretary, armed with a pen and the memory of an elephant, taking notes on everything, including who brought store-bought cookies. Scandalous. You're greeted at the door, handed a stack of flyers and a passive-aggressive smile, and pointed to your seat near the least sticky folding table. The opening minutes are pure ceremony. Old business, new business, and the ongoing saga of why the playground seesaw still hasn't been fixed since Jimmy P's unfortunate incident last fall. Then come the real fireworks, planning the next bake sale. This is not a casual affair. It's a masterclass in culinary brinkmanship. With each mother guarding her famous recipe as if it were a nuclear code, there are discussions of nut allergies, the merits of margarine versus butter, and whispered threats about accidentally forgetting to label the gluten-free brownies. Bake sales, you discover, are where reputations are made and destroyed. The cookies aren't just snacks, they're statements. A perfectly frosted tray of cupcakes can win you allies. Burn the bottoms. You'll be hearing about it until your youngest graduates. There are rumors, always unconfirmed, about sabotage, swapped sugar for salt, mysteriously missing cooling racks, and a particularly ruthless incident involving lemon bars in the wrong-sized pan. But the politics don't end with baked goods. The real war is over who gets to run the spring pageant. The coveted role of pageant chair comes with power, prestige, and the chance to immortalize your taste in crepe, paper, and costumes. The campaign for this honor starts months in advance with alliances formed over carpool arrangements and strategic coffee dates. Passive-aggressive compliments. You're so brave to use that much glitter are exchanged like currency. Someone brings up last year's pageant, when the angel wings caught fire, and suddenly the tension is thick enough to slice with a butter knife. All the while, information flows like punch at the refreshment table. Who's getting divorced? Who's repainting their kitchen? Which teacher is rumored to have a secret fiancé? If knowledge is power, then gossip is tactical nuclear deterrence. You learn to listen more than you speak, to offer just enough detail to stay interesting, but never so much you become a topic. Sometimes a tray of cookies is just a tray of cookies, but sometimes it's a peace offering, a warning, or a declaration of war. By the time the meeting winds down, alliances have shifted. Plans have been made, and at least one mother is quietly gloating over her best in show blue ribbon from last year's potato salad contest. You gather your dishes, promise to sign up for something, anything other than being treasurer, and slip out before anyone can assign you to the committee that organizes committee signups. The school lights go out, but the PDA never sleeps. The battleground may be empty, but the next skirmish is already being planned. The upcoming sock hop, the book fair, and of course, the end Ophir picnic, where the cookie table will once again be ground zero. In the 1950s, the art of weaponized cookies is more than survival. It's how you keep your place in the social order, one casserole at a time. The basement's not just for laundry. It's the only place where adults can unwind with a game of gin rummy, an accidental cigarette, and jokes that never make it upstairs. The kids think it's boring, but this is where real emotional processing happens quietly with 3 fingers of bourbon. Let's descend those creaky linoleum-covered steps away from the clatter of dishes and the ceaseless demands of the good living room. Down here in the recreation room, the air is heavier, the lights a little softer, and the decor, wood paneling, tasseled lamps, and ancient plaid sofa, strikingly different from the rest of the house. If the upstairs is all order and expectation, the basement is where the grown-ups go to let their seams show. It's equal parts sanctuary, bunker, and social laboratory, complete with a bar cart stocked like it's always somewhere in Milwaukee. The center of gravity is the card table. It's worn, a little sticky, and perpetually surrounded by a cloud of cigarette smoke, and stories that drift just above the sound of Bing Crosby on the record player, gin rummy, bridge, or poker. These are less games than excuses to vent, laugh, and trade stories they'd never repeat over Sunday dinner. A cigarette dangles from someone's lip, bourbon glasses clink, and someone always claims to have seen Frank Sinatra in Atlantic City, though no one can agree on the year. Conversations here are a different breed. Upstairs, it's all polite small talk and reminders about taking your shoes off. Down here, a neighbor might let slip about trouble at work, or someone might make a joke about Aunt Ruth's 3rd husband that leaves everyone red-faced with laughter. The topics are hushed, but not forbidden, just buffered by a layer of what happens in the basement, stays in the basement. Someone jokes about buying a camper and driving to Mexico, and for a fleeting moment, you can feel the freedom in the room only for it to dissolve with the next shuffle of the deck. This is also where the house rules are quietly bent. The no drinking before 5 policy is honored more in the breach than the observance. The kids know they're not allowed downstairs during adult time, but the muffled sound of laughter, clinking, glasses, and music leaking up the stairs is a nightly reminder that somewhere below their carefully curated lives, their parents are still a little wild. The recreation room is also home to other relics. A dartboard with holes in every wall, a ping-pong table that's half storage and half sporting arena, and a shelf of board games with missing pieces that only come out when someone's had just enough bourbon to start getting competitive. The walls are decorated with old pennants, bowling trophies, and an unspoken agreement not to discuss what happened during the last New Year's Eve party. Even the air down here is different. It smells like old books, spilled whiskey, and faint memories of 1,000 cigarettes smoked in secret rebellion. It's a space where parents become people, where marriage gets negotiated over a hand of cards, and the real anxieties, money, work, dreams deferred, are aired out in laughter and shared glances. The only rule is unspoken. No matter what's said, everyone goes back upstairs a little lighter, a little more fortified against whatever tomorrow brings. Eventually, the night winds down, glasses are emptied, cards shuffled one last time, and someone makes a joke about having to face the real world. The grown-ups climb the stairs, slower than when they came down, ready to slip back into the roles of responsible parents, diligent workers, and upstanding neighbors. Upstairs, everything returns to its proper place. Downstairs, the secrets of the recreation room settle in for another night, waiting for the next hand to be dealt. In the 1950s, the recreation room isn't just a place. It's a pressure valve, a smoky, laughter-filled proof that everyone, no matter how well behaved on the surface, needs somewhere to let their guard down and be a little bit gloriously imperfect. You learn quickly that it's not what you do, but what your neighbors think you do. Hanging laundry on a Sunday is a criminal offense. Mismatched curtains are cause for public concern. Privacy only if you're very, very good at whispering. Let's take a stroll down Maple Avenue, where every house is painted a shade from the approved palette, and the lawns are trimmed within a quarter into municipal perfection. The first thing you notice isn't the scent of lilacs or the distant jingle of an ice cream truck, but the steady hum of vigilance. Out here, eyes are everywhere, peeking between Venetian blinds, glancing up over the tops of hedges, or pretending to weed the garden while actually taking a census of who's parking in front of whose house. There's a code to be followed, and it's stricter than any set of posted rules. No one tells you how it works. You just absorb it like secondhand smoke or gossip. Cars must be washed before noon on Saturday. Children are to be seen, preferably playing hopscotch in clean clothes, but never heard. Especially after 7 o'clock p.m. garbage cans are rolled to the curb at precisely the same moment as everyone else's. Bring yours out too early or leave them out too late. And you might as well have declared your intent to let civilization crumble. Then there's the window test. Curtains must match from the outside. An interior decorator's tyranny enforced by Neighborhood Watch. If you dare to mix florals with stripes, prepare for a parade of subtle comments about taste of the next block party. The mailbox flag must always be down by dusk. Newspapers should be collected promptly. An unclaimed paper signals disaster, vacation at best, tragedy at worst, and a silent invitation for Mrs. Jenkins to call your relatives. Domestic activities are carefully scheduled for maximum social approval. Laundry is hung discreetly, never on Sunday, and always with the colored garments artfully hidden behind a shield of white linens. Lawnmowers roar into action promptly after breakfast on Saturdays, as if suburbanites everywhere have all agreed to wage war on grass at dawn. Barbecues may only begin after 3 o'clock p.m., and the correct number of guests is enough to look popular, but not enough to upset the parking situation. Whispered communication is the real currency. Voices carry through open windows. So, conversations about marital squabbles, rebellious teenagers, or last night's unfortunate casserole experiment are conducted in kitchens with the tap running or outdoors during walks. Phone calls are made in a hush, and anyone who dares raise their voice in the backyard is quickly reminded of their audience by a gentle cough from the neighbor's porch. Of course, the rules extend to personal presentation. Men must mow the lawn in collared shirts, not a t-shirt. Heaven forbid. And women should greet the mailman looking at least semi-presentable with lipstick and hair done. Kids walk to school in pairs or small herds, never alone. And anyone caught running wild is gently but firmly returned to their own yard with a warning glance that means we're watching. There's an art to minding your own business, one you master by adulthood. But there's a finer art to appearing to mind your own business while actually knowing everything that happens within a 3-house radius. The neighbor who keeps to herself is either the most respected or most feared, depending on whether she bakes at Christmas, birthday parties, yard sales, and any home renovations are opportunities for both celebration and silent critique. The pecking order is maintained not by confrontation, but by 1,000 small gestures, a raised eyebrow, a slightly too long pause, a card in your mailbox welcoming you and warning you to the neighborhood. And in the end, you learn to love the routine, the safety and predictability, the unspoken promise that as long as you follow the code, you belong. Suburbia's unwritten laws are a game with no rulebook, played by people who never admit they're playing, all determined to keep the peace, maintain the myth, and ensure the curtains match, at least from the street. Sex education in the 1950s is best described as creative fiction. If you're lucky, you get an awkward pamphlet and a parental figure who'd rather move to Canada than answer your questions. You figure out the rest in the back of a station wagon. Let's set the scene. You're 12, surrounded by a fog of curiosity, schoolyard rumors, and an ever-present sense that you're not supposed to know whatever it is you so desperately want to know. At school, the health talk arrives with a flurry of permission slips and the nervous energy of teachers who would rather teach algebra to squirrels than address human anatomy. You file into the multi-purpose room, girls and boys separated, as if ignorance is contagious. The boys get a film strip about growing up strong with the emotional tone of a farm equipment safety video, while the girls receive a lecture about becoming a young lady, which mostly involves advice on personal hygiene and how to not faint in public. The big questions are left swirling in the air, unspoken and unanswered. If you're feeling bold, you corner your parents, usually mom, since dad is now obsessed with mowing the lawn or fixing something that isn't broken. The conversation lasts approximately 38 seconds. She hands you a pamphlet with diagrams drawn by someone who has clearly never seen a real human before, and then tells you in no uncertain terms that nice children don't ask those kinds of questions. The phrase when you're older becomes the all-purpose deflection rivaled only by "you'll understand someday." Of course, your friends aren't much help. Their knowledge is a patchwork quilt of half-remembered advice, bad jokes, and urban legends whispered behind the bleachers. According to Tommy, you can get pregnant from holding hands if you really mean it. And Jenny claims she has an aunt who got the talk and fainted right in the kitchen. Someone swears their older brother saw a French movie once and now knows everything. But no one can explain what that everything is. The less said about what you overheard at the roller rink, the better. Sex ed in the 1950s isn't so much about education as it is about damage control. School textbooks skip from cells to marriage with all the subtlety of a car crash. You're left to fill in the gaps using context clues, your older cousin's comic books, and pure wild speculation. The result, a generation that can diagram a frog's reproductive system, but can't explain why they're suddenly sweating when Betty Sue looks their way during homeroom. If you want real answers, you have to go on a quest, searching through medical encyclopedias in the town library, hoping no one sees what you're reading. There's a secret section in the bookstore with books wrapped in brown paper, but those are strictly for adults, and you're convinced, probably written in code. Even television avoids the topic. Married couples sleep in separate beds. Pregnant women vanish from the screen, and the only time intimacy is shown, it's between Lassie and a lamppost. So, you improvise. The back seat of the station wagon parked in the shadow of the local drive-in becomes the setting for much discovery and much confusion. Hushed voices and clumsy hands, all set to the soundtrack of Elvis crooning about heartbreak. And still the mysteries remain. You grow up learning more from innuendo and guesswork than from any formal source. If you're lucky, you emerge relatively unscathed, albeit convinced that the stock has some serious logistical challenges. In the end, the birds and the bees of the 1950s are mostly myth, folklore, and euphemism. A fairy tale told in whispers, hints, and knowing glances. It's not a curriculum. It's a scavenger hunt. But somehow, miraculously, everyone figures out just enough to keep the story going for another generation. After sunset, the glasses come out and the place gin flows. Mom claims it's just one drink to unwind, but by the third round, Everyone's dancing to Perry Como and debating the merits of avocado-colored appliances. Let's draw the curtains and listen to the gentle clink of ice cubes tumbling into highball glasses. The day's parade of casseroles, PDA intrigue, and vacuum cleaner marathons is finally over. In the quiet twilight, the house transforms. No longer a stage for perfection, but a haven for a different kind of ritual. Cocktail hour, 1950s style. The children are dispatched to their rooms. The husband is firmly attached to his newspaper or the evening news, and Mom becomes the undisputed queen of her own tiny speakeasy. It always starts innocently enough. Mom heads to the kitchen, humming along to Pericomo or Rosemary Clooney. Reaching for the good glasses, the ones that don't have cartoon characters etched into the side, she opens the liquor cabinet, tucked behind the canned soup, and reveals a tidy arsenal of gin, vermouth, and whatever cordial someone brought as a hostess gift last Christmas. The first martini is just to take the edge off. After a day spent wrangling children, negotiating laundry, and battling the existential dread of mayonnaise-based salads, she's earned it. Soon, the party grows. A neighbor drops by with a bottle of something continental, and suddenly it's a proper gathering. The conversation starts with light topics, recipes, sales at the department store, that mysterious new family on Cedar Lane, but quickly veers toward more dangerous waters. By the second round, secrets slip out with the olive brine. Someone confesses that her world-famous lemon chiffon pie is actually a Betty Crocker mix. Another admits that her husband has been sleeping in the den since Easter. Heads nod, sympathetic and slightly tipsy. The ice is broken. The martinis keep coming. There's an unspoken rule. Complaints are allowed as long as they're wrapped in a joke. Can you believe Tommy's teacher sent home another note about his handwriting? Maybe she should try teaching lefties. Laughter bubbles up, blending with the soft strains of big band, music drifting from the record player. The conversation is equal parts confession and commiseration. A support group in heels and pearls, fueled by Jean and good intentions. As the night rolls on, the line between tipsy and liberated blurs. The coffee table is pushed aside. Someone finds the courage to switch the record to something a little bolder. Maybe even Elvis. If nobody's watching, there's a moment of pure joy. Slippers shuffling, hips swaying. All the day's frustrations spun away on a living room dance floor. For a brief, shining hour, nobody cares about the state of the lawn, the gossip in the PDA, or whether the Jell-O mold's set properly. Life is good, or at least it feels like it could be. But eventually, reality tiptoes back in. The clock strikes 11. Dads wander through blurry-eye to ask if anyone's seen the dog or the TV remote. The neighbors collect their coats, trading recipes, and slightly slurred reassurances that we really must do this again. Mom tidies up, humming to herself, the night's laughter lingering like the scent of gin and lemon. When it's all over, she sits quietly, feet tucked under her, savoring the last melting cubes in her glass. Tomorrow, the routine begins again. Breakfast to serve, floors to mop, and children to wrangle. But tonight, for just a little while, she let herself unwind. She laughed too loudly, danced a little wildly, and didn't care if her hair was perfect. In the 1950s, mothers and martinis were more than a stereotype. They were a survival strategy, a pressure valve, and a small rebellion against a world that demanded constant composure. And somewhere between the second and third round, Mom found a few stolen moments of happiness poured over ice and served with a twist. Somewhere hidden behind the lawnmower and the urge to repress emotions, Dad is secretly building a model train empire or whittling ducks out of balsa wood. This is how he copes with existential dread and being married to someone who alphabetizes the canned goods. Let's take a quiet walk out to the garage or down into the basement. Those shadowy realms Dad has claimed as his own. It's not just a space for tools and broken bicycles. It's a sanctuary, a makeshift den where Dad sheds the uniform of pressed slacks and the thousand-y stare of the daily commute, and reclaims a small, stubborn piece of his own soul. There, nestled among cans of motor oil and unfinished honeydew lists, you'll find his true passions. Model train layouts sprawling across old plywood, paint-splattered workbenches, jars of mysterious screws, and half-carved bits of wood that promise one day to become ducks. You rarely see him in full creative flight. Hobbies for Dad are best pursued after everyone else is in bed or safely occupied with a rerun of Guns of Smoke. He'll disappear with a mug of coffee or a bottle of beer, depending on the gravity of the week. Flick on the world's dimmest work light and get to work. Out come the tiny screwdrivers, the bottles of glue, and that special face he makes. The one that says, "Nobody bother me unless something's on fire." If you're lucky, he'll invite you in, waving you over like you're being let in on a grand conspiracy. Want to see something neat? He'll ask, showing off a hand-painted model locomotive complete with a speck of soot on its smokestack. Or maybe it's a fleet of carved wooden ducks lined up like parade floats awaiting their big moment. If you ask him why, he shrugs. Just something to keep my hands busy. Translation: it's cheaper than therapy and less suspicious than long walks at midnight. These hobbies are more than time fillers. They're the quiet, persistent antidote to a life spent following rules, meeting quotas, and mowing grass into oblivion. With every detail added to his train town, a tiny barber hop, a church with real lights, a water tower that actually leaks, Dad stakes out a territory where everything is under control, where the mail always gets delivered on time, and nobody ever forgets to mow the miniature lawn. Sometimes he'll lose himself in magazines devoted to the craft. Doge earring pages about rare linoleum engines, or the best way to achieve a realistic weathering effect on boxcars. Trips to the hardware store, already a holy ritual, take twice as long if he remembers he needs just one more piece of basswood or a new shade of green for the flocking. He might not say it out loud, but you know the project will never be done. That's the point. The endless potential, the pleasure of tinkering, the freedom to make something without anyone peering over his shoulder or telling him it's not practical. And if the model trains run a little off track or the ducks all end up with wonky bills, it doesn't matter. There are no quarterly reviews here, no neighborhood committees, no one to judge except the family cat. And the cat is notoriously supportive. Sometimes Dad just sits and looks at his work, sipping coffee and listening to the quiet hum of possibility. In those moments, the worries of work, bills, and the latest PDA drama recede, replaced by the soothing certainty of a freshly painted caboose. So, if you ever wondered how Dad makes it through the days of gray flannel and relentless routine, now you know. It's not the lawn, not the job, not even the meatloaf. It's the secret empire of hobbies. Tiny trains and whittled ducks, little worlds built one careful piece at a time that keeps him going. In the 1950s, Dad's secret hobbies aren't just a pastime. They're a life raft, floating bravely in a sea of behaved normally. The weekly trip to the grocery store is a pilgrimage through endless aisles of canned soup, processed cheese, and more brands of margarine than could possibly be necessary. The goal is not nutrition, but the illusion of plenty. You buy enough food to survive an apocalypse, or at least a PDA meeting. Let's start in the driveway, where the car is loaded with a fleet of reusable canvas bags that will never actually be used, and at least one child who has been bribed with the vague promise of a treat if they behave. Grocery shopping in the 1950s isn't just an errand. It's a spectacle, a test of nerves, and a low-key competitive sport. You arrive at the new sparkling supermarket, all chrome and neon with air conditioning so powerful you briefly consider shopping your Parker. Inside, it's a wonderland of consumerism. Carts the size of rowboats glide down wide, waxed aisles under the hypnotic glare of fluorescent lights. You're greeted by a cornucopia of produce, most of which is more decorative than edible. Oranges in neat pyramids, Apples so shiny they could double as mirrors, and bananas that will never ripen at the same rate. But the real action is in the middle aisles, where the magic of post-war America is stacked floor to ceiling in colorful tins and boxes. Canned goods are king. Campbell's soup for every occasion. Cream of mushroom, chicken noodle, tomato, and the mysterious vegetable medley, which contains precisely one identifiable vegetable. Spam and corned beef hash await those nights when imagination and energy runs out. Shelves sag under the weight of tinned fruit cocktail, peaches and syrup, and enough pineapple rings to tile your kitchen backsplash. Dairy is an adventure. Processed cheese in individually wrapped slices, wedges, and bricks that may never expire. Margarine in more colors and brands than the human palate can comprehend. Butter is rationed out for special occasions, which in practice means any time you need to impress your in-laws. Milk comes in glass bottles with thick cream on top. Or, if you're feeling modern, in waxy cartons that always leak when you pour too quickly. The freezer aisle is a new frontier. Swanson TV dinners, peas frozen into green marbles, fish sticks, so uniform they look like tiny building blocks. Ice cream comes in 3 flavors: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. But don't worry, there's a rainbow of sherbet if you feel like living dangerously. Baked goods are a minefield of temptation and judgment. Bread comes white and soft, best consumed within 48 hours, or else it transforms into a pillow. Pound cakes, donuts, and box cake mixes all but leap into your cart. At checkout, you face the gauntlet. Should you give in and let the kids pick out a candy bar, or do you stand firm and pretend raisins are a treat? The shopping list itself is a coded document, heavy on essentials and light on actual desires. You learn the art of substitution. No pears, use peaches. No butter, use margarine. Out of gel, simply combine whatever is left in the pantry and call it special. Coupons are clipped and traded like baseball cards. The real triumph is not sticking to the budget, but returning home with enough food to fill the pantry, fridge, and everyone's sense of security for another week. By the end of the journey, the cart is overflowing, and so are your arms as you load paper bags into the trunk. The drive home is a quiet victory lap. You know the neighbors are watching, just in case you're seen with store-brand anything. Or worse, forget to double bag the eggs. Back at home, unloading becomes a family event. Groceries are inventoried and arranged in neat rows. A living shrine to prosperity and the post-war dream. For a few glorious days, the cupboards are full, the fridge is crowded, and you can face the world. Be it a PDA bake sale, or just another Tuesday with the confidence that you're prepared for whatever comes, even if it's just another dinner of casserole and canned peas. If you're between the ages of 13 and 19, you're basically public enemy number 1. Your music is too loud, your jeans too tight, and your hair a harbinger of moral decline. The only thing more terrifying to your parents is Elvis Presley's hips. Let's step into the saddle shoes of a 1950s teenager. You exist at the intersection of suspicion and hysteria, trapped in a world that expects you to look wholesome, but act invisible. You're not quite a child, not yet an adult. And everywhere you go, people are convinced you're one sock hop away from bringing down the pillars of civilization. The moment you leave the house, parents everywhere clutch their pearls and prepare for the end times. Or at least for rock and roll to erode the moral fiber of America by next Thursday. Your wardrobe alone is grounds for social panic. Blue jeans, real, riveted, and purchased with babysitting or lawn mowing money, signal open rebellion. Skirts get shorter, collars get looser, and there's always that one friend who dares to wear sunglasses indoors. For the boys, hair grows dangerously long, slick back with enough pomade to waterproof a battleship. For the girls, it's all about poodle skirts and bobby socks worn with an air of practiced indifference. Lipstick shades get bolder, and every adult is sure you're one tube away from juvenile delinquency. Music is your second language, and the radio is your lifeline. You huddle with friends around a transistor. Dial tuned to the local station spinning Chuck Berry and Little Richard. Volume cranked just low enough to avoid total parental meltdown. If you're caught twisting to jailhouse rock, the punishment is swift. A lecture about good taste, usually followed by a demonstration of the foxtrot, which nobody under the age of 40 has ever performed voluntarily. The car is your holy grail. Every teenager dreams of the open road, but most are lucky to inherit the family's dented Chevy on a Friday night. Gas is cheap, and so is the thrill of freedom. You cruise Main Street, windows down, one hand on the wheel and the other fiddling with the radio. Every stoplight is a stage. Every parking lot, a meeting ground. Parents tell you not to loiter, which is their way of saying have fun. But don't look like you're having fun. School is a battleground, less about education and more about surviving the daily gauntlet of cliques, rumors, and dress codes stricter than some border crossings. Teachers regard you with eyes, convinced every note you pass is a manifesto. The lunchroom is divided along invisible lines. Jocks, greases, squares, and the eternally lost new kid. You learn fast, blend in, but never disappear completely. Stand out, but not so much that you get called to the principal's office for inappropriate conduct, which can mean anything from chewing gum to smirking at the wrong time. The rules at home are even stricter. Curfews are enforced with military precision. You're expected to answer the phone with a yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And heaven help you if you slam a door or roll your eyes. Every movie, every comic book, every sock left on the floor is scrutinized for signs of rebellion. Respect your elders is repeated like a spell, and any mention of dating is met with more supervision than a top-secret government project. Yet, for all the hand-wringing and lecture-giving, being a teenager in the 1950s is also a little bit thrilling. Every song, every stolen moment at the malt shop, every whispered secret behind the bleachers feels like a small private revolution. You know you're a menace to decency, to tradition, to the status quo. And deep down you suspect that's exactly what the world needs. Because the truth is, every generation of teenagers terrifies their parents. But in the 1950s, you set the template. Loud music, wild fashion, and the ability to scandalize the neighborhood just by swiving your hips. The rest, as they say, is history, preferably played at full volume. There's a reason your suburb looks so uniform, and it's not just paint color. Underneath the white picket fences is an entire architecture of exclusion whispered just loud enough to be understood, but never ever written down on the neighborhood welcome brochure. Let's walk down those flawless sidewalks, past manicured lawns and matching shutters, and peek beneath the glossy surface of 1950 suburbia. On paper, every block is a utopia of good schools and nice families, but the real rules are in the margins, the invisible lines drawn to keep certain people out. You notice quickly that everyone looks the same, talks the same, and if you ask about it, you're told it's just the kind of neighborhood we like. The realtors call it stable. The neighbors call it safe. The actual mechanism is exclusion dressed in the lace gloves of respectability. It starts with a neighborhood covenant, a contract everyone signs, but nobody really discusses. These covenants, often buried in the paperwork, are written in careful legalese. No livestock, no billboards, no indesirable elements. It sounds harmless, even charming, unless you know that undesirable is a catch-all for anyone who isn't white, Christian, and middle class. Sometimes it's explicit. Bans on selling or renting to people of color, Jews, or anyone whose family tree branches the wrong way. More often, it's a look, a silence, or a phone call from someone just looking out for the community. Polite racism is subtle, but it's everywhere. The for sale signs vanish overnight. If a black family comes to the open house, your parents reassure you. It's not personal. It's just how things are. The ladies at the bridge club talk in hushed tones about the neighborhood changing, and everyone nods in solemn agreement. The mailman, the grocer, the garbage collector, all white, all living somewhere appropriate. And if someone breaks the code, if a family moves in who doesn't fit the template, the welcome committee suddenly forgets to show up. Lawns get colder, smiles get tighter, and 1,000 tiny acts of avoidance make their message clear. You don't belong here. Even the children know. They hear it in jokes on the playground, in the way adults tense up when the news comes on, in the books assigned at school, always featuring families who look exactly like theirs. If you ask why, you're told to mind your own business. Don't make trouble. Don't ask questions. The adults change the subject. The silence is its own lesson. These boundaries aren't just about who moves in. They're about who gets to feel a home. The local swimming pool is members only. The country club is invitation only. The school PTA, the scout troop, the church choir, each with its own invisible screen, filtering out anyone deemed too different. The system is maintained by plausible deniability. We're not racist, your neighbor will say. It's just tradition. It's just what works, and it works at least for those it's meant to serve. The streets stay quiet, the property values climb, and the story of the American dream is told and retold as if everyone has the same invitation. But beneath the surface, the real history hums. A legacy of exclusion, fear, and carefully managed sameness. Sometimes you'll hear a crack in the facade, a whispered disagreement, a kid who asks, "Why can't Jimmy come over?" The answer is always a dodge, a deflection. Change is the real threat, and the unspoken rule is to keep things just the way they are. So next time you admire the neatness of 1950s suburbia, remember the price. The neighborhood covenant was more than paperwork. It was a social contract written in invisible ink, enforced by smiles and silence, promising harmony at the cost of justice. In the 1950s, polite racism was as American as apple pie, served cold and always with a side of plausible deniability. Feeling blue? That's just nerves, anxiety. Maybe you need more fresh air or fewer feelings. Nobody talks about depression, but everyone quietly medicates it with optimism, casseroles, and exactly 3 hours of television per day. Let's step inside the 1950s American home, where the answer to every emotional challenge is a mix of silence, starch, and the occasional pot roast. Mental health isn't a conversation. It's an unspoken undercurrent, something you handle yourself, or preferably not at all. If you're sad, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Never mind that your boots are tight, your feet hurt, and you haven't sat down since a.m. The first sign that someone is struggling is a change in routine. Maybe dad's morning paper sits unread or mom's lipstick goes unworn. The solution is always the same. Push through. A neighbor who seems off is described as a little tired lately, or just going through a phase. Children are told to go outside and get some sun, as if vitamin D can outmaneuver generational trauma. Doctors, if they're ever consulted, might recommend a tonic, a rest cure, or for the truly delicate, a week in the country, provided you keep up with your correspondence and still send thank you notes. Housewives bear a double burden. Between the pressure to host perfect bridge luncheons and keep the house spotless enough for a surprise visit from the ladies' auxiliary, there's not much room left for bad days. If you find yourself overwhelmed, there's a pill for that mother's little helper or a cocktail at 5 p.m. or both. Quiet desperation is the water everyone's swimming in. Let's dim the lights in the living room because every family in the neighborhood is doing the same, and take our places on the plastic-covered sofa. The dinner dishes are stacked in the sink. The homework is done or artfully hidden, and the dog is banished to a corner to choose something he absolutely should not. It's time for the nightly ritual tuning into the news where Walter Conite, or a similar avatar of calm certainty, will summarize the day's chaos with a reassuringly steady voice and an expression that says, "Yes, we're all a little bit doomed, but let's keep our ties straight anyway." The television screen glows like a tiny hearth, drawing the family close with the promise of knowledge and just a hint of collective dread. The anchors come on, white shirts, narrow ties, hair unmovable in a breeze, eyes fixed somewhere just above a national average for emotional regulation. They report on school board elections, baseball scores, and the latest in agricultural technology. The weather comes on, and everyone pretends to care whether it's going to rain tomorrow. But what they're really waiting for is the international news. That code word for the real drama. And then here it comes, the nuclear bit. In even practice tones, the newsman explained the latest development in the arms race. Maybe the Soviets tested something bigger than ever. Maybe the U.S. government is building more fallout shelters in the Midwest. There's always a helpful diagram complete with reassuring arrows explaining how to duck and cover if the sirens sound. As a child, you're just beginning to grasp that nuclear war is a real thing. Somewhere out there between the cereal commercials and the local dog show results, the adults watch with expressions somewhere between concern and practiced denial. Dad grunts and makes a comment about the Reds. Mom frowns and absent-mindedly smooths her skirt, and Grandma mutters something about buying more canned peaches. The mood is tense, but nobody dares say the word scared. Fear, like everything else in the house, is kept orderly and silent, folded up and tucked behind the TV guide. You meanwhile try to process the surreal combination of normally and apocalypse. 10 minutes ago, you were trying to steal the last piece of cake. Now you're imagining what it would be like to live in a world where cake and everything else is radioactive. The broadcast offers helpful tips. Remember children, in the event of a nuclear attack. Find shelter, cover your head, and stay calm. It's all very practical, as if the difference between survival and disaster is whether you remembered to duck under the coffee table. Commercials come on promising a new brand of toothpaste, the freshest Wonder Bread, or the peace of mind that comes with a new family sedan. Because nothing says prepared for Armageddon like white walls and extra trunk space. The news returns now with a lighter story about a rescued kitten or a school play. The anchors smile, and that's the way it is. Good night and good luck. As the TV flickers off, the family disperses, each person carrying their own little piece of anxiety to bed. The children wonder about fallout. The parents wonder about bills, and everyone prays that tomorrow will be just a little more peaceful. The world outside is dangerous, but inside, at least for now, you're safe. Surrounded by linoleum floors, pastel walls, and a quiet, stubborn hope that it's all going to be okay. So you climb into bed, pull the covers tight, and drift off to sleep, lulled by the sound of the world's bravest newsman and the faint hum of nuclear anxieties just outside the window. Good night, America. Don't forget to duck and cover. Every summer, the family embarks on a cross-country odyssey in a car with no seat belts and an air conditioner that works about as well as a handshake in a hurricane. You'll spend 14 hours fighting over maps, inhaling melted crayons, and playing the quiet game, which nobody wins. The destination is usually a national park, a roadside attraction, or if your parents are feeling wild, a motel with color TV in the window, and exactly one towel for 5 people. Let's start with the packing. The car is loaded the night before. Dad presiding like a general over a campaign, barking orders about which suitcase goes where and why. Nobody needs to bring more than 2 pairs of socks. The trunk is a Tetris puzzle of suitcases, thermoses, a picnic basket, half the kitchen pantry, and a first aid kit, so understood it might as well be decorative. Mom prepares a stack of peanut butter sandwiches and deviled eggs. Food selected specifically for their ability to reach room temperature and stay there menacingly for hours. Departure is scheduled for 6 a.m. sharp, but after last-minute emergencies, lost flip-flop, forgotten map, a sibling's sudden existential crisis. You pull away from the driveway as the sun peeks over the hedges, and the neighbor pretends not to judge your head start. The first hour is all hope and novelty. Car games, sing-alongs, Dad's assurance that we'll make good time if we don't stop. The second hour is where reality sets in. The car itself is a heat trap. The interior a blend of vinyl and sweat. The back seat is an ecosystem of its own. Spilled orangeade, abandoned comic books, and one melting crayon that glues itself permanently to your thigh. There's a territorial war over window space and a long, fruitless debate about whose turn it is to sit on the hump in the middle. Windows are rolled down manually, which means the faster you go, the louder it gets until conversation is replaced by the symphony of wind and complaints. Dad drives with grim determination, sunglasses perched on his nose, chewing over the next route choice and ignoring every billboard advertising an alligator farm or mystery cave. It's just rude to point out the pool. For men, it's even worse. The idea that a husband, father, or breadwinner could be not okay is as unthinkable as skipping lawn mowing on Saturday. If Dad is quiet lately, the family quietly tiptoes around him. He buries his troubles in the garage, beneath the hood of the car, or behind a fortress of model trains. Tears are out of the question. Anger is quietly sanctioned as long as it's expressed at sporting events or in response to burnt meatloaf. Teenagers, meanwhile, are considered emotionally combustible by default. Mood swings are growing pains. If a daughter cries, it's hormones. If a son sulks, it's boys being boys. Actual talk about feelings is as rare as a Jell-O salad without marshmallows. If a child shows signs of true distress, the school counselor might suggest more extracurriculars. Nothing cures existential dread like a clarinet lesson. Instead of real discussion, there are diversions. Television offers a nightly escape. 3 hours of sitcoms, game shows, and the evening news watched in absolute silence, punctuated by commercials for new cars and antacids. Optimism is a shield. Every problem is met with a can-do attitude, a cheery, it could be worse, and the hope that nobody notices when the cracks show. Gossip is another safety valve as neighbors trade whispered updates on who isn't quite herself lately, always followed by the hopeful suggestion that she'll snap out of it soon. Occasionally, someone does reach a breaking point. Maybe a neighbor quietly disappears for a little rest in a facility on the edge of town. The children are told they've gone to visit family, and the subject is dropped as neatly and firmly as last season's drapes. The lesson is clear. Don't make trouble. Don't make a scene. And whatever you do, don't ask for help. So you muddle through. You bury your fears in casserole dishes, sweep your sorrows under the rug, and hope that tomorrow's sunshine and another episode of I Love Lucy will do the trick. In the 1950s, mental health was everyone's private burden, quietly endured, never named, and always just one forced mile away from being fine. Nothing says freedom like piling the entire family into a Chevy Bear, rolling the windows down, and heading absolutely nowhere. The highways are new, the snacks are terrible, and your dad's sense of direction is both confident and catastrophically wrong. Let's step out onto the steaming blacktop of 1950s America, where the family car is not just transportation. It's a rolling living room, a status symbol, and the scene of roughly 80% of your childhood arguments. The driveway is a stage, and your father is the star, carefully backing the car out while delivering a running commentary on gas mileage and the importance of beating the rush. The car itself is a behemoth, all chrome and two-tone paint. The tail fins so big you're convinced they could pick up radio signals from outer space. Inside the seating is a democratic disaster. Kids are packed in the back, wedged between a thermos of lukewarm coffee and a picnic basket containing precisely 4 sandwiches and 7 hard-boiled eggs. The youngest gets the middle seat, a position known as the ejector seat, due to its lack of seat belts and the risk of being catapulted into someone's lap at every sharp turn. There's a lot of arguing over window control, which is managed by a crank that threatens to break your wrist with every rotation. The dog, if present, is somewhere on the floor, shedding heroically and occasionally eating a crayon. The ritual begins. Maps are unfolded upside down. The route is announced with great ceremony. And the first of many, "Are we there yet?" is fired into the back seat. The answer, as always, is soon, which means absolutely nothing. Dad drives with the confidence of a man who has never once been lost. Even as your family passes the same billboard for world's largest ball of twine 3 times in 1 hour, Mom is the navigator armed with an atlas, a collection of roadside coupons, and the patience of a saint. Her directions are either ignored or dismissed as not how my father would have done it. On the open road, the landscape flashes by in a technicolor blur. Endless cornfields, tiny motel, gas stations with neon signs, and the occasional cow staring judgmentally from a fence line. Every town promises a diner famous for pie, but somehow the pie is always sold out. The soundtrack is a blend of static from the AM radio Perry Como crooning through the dashboard speaker, and the sound of your siblings fighting over whose turn it is to pick the next snack. If you're lucky, the trip coincides with a drive-in movie where you'll watch a monster flick through a windshield fogged up by popcorn grease and your dad's breathless explanations of plot holes. Rest stops are another adventure. Picnic tables bolted to concrete. Mysterious stains on the benches and restrooms. So questionable your mom brings her own toilet paper, just in case. Everyone gets out, stretches, and pretends they haven't spent the last hour in Mortal Kombat over a bag of potato chips. Dad checks the oil, the tires, and his dignity, then piles everyone back in with military efficiency. Despite the chaos, there's a magic to it all. The road unspools ahead, promising freedom, adventure, and a motel room with a pool that will inevitably be closed for maintenance. Sometimes you drive for hours with no destination, just for the joy of movement. Sometimes you get hopelessly lost and discover the best ice cream you've ever tasted in a town, not even on the map. By the time you arrive home, sunburned, slightly car sick, and surrounded by empty Coke bottles and lost shoes, everyone is exhausted, but secretly grateful. The journey may not have gone as planned, but the stories are now family legend. In the 1950s, the open road wasn't just about escape. It was about coming together, even if only for as long as it took to get to the next rest stop. As the day ends, you gather around the TV to watch men in suits tell you that everything is fine, the world is safe, and also here's what to do if your face melts off in a thermonuclear war. Sleep tight, America. Mom's job is navigation and mediation, spinning the map around, reading tiny print upside down, and producing snacks on demand, all while handing out stern warnings about not touching your sibling one more time. Bathroom stops are rationed like water in the Sahara. Every request is met with a skeptical, "Didn't you just go?" Until finally, Dad caves and pulls into a gas station where the restroom key is attached to a hubcap. Lunch is eaten at a picnic table bolted to a slab of concrete in a patch of sun, so intense you briefly question whether you're actually in Death Valley. The DLL'd eggs have mutated, and the sandwiches taste like Tupperware and longing. Back on the road, the afternoon brings scenic views, forced appreciation for roadside geology, and at least one wrong turn that ends with Dad blaming the map, the state highway department, or when all else fails, Alaska. By evening, tempers fray and the quiet game is broken by desperate negotiations. "If you don't poke me, I'll give you my dessert at dinner." The highlight of the day arrives when you pull into a motel glowing with neon, where the promise of a pool and color TV is enough to make everyone forget about the sunburn and the fact that someone forgot their pajamas. Finally, as everyone collapses onto the beds, or if unlucky, the floor, you realize you survived another family vacation. In the 1950s, the yearly road trip wasn't about relaxation. It was a test of patience, navigation, and endurance, with the only guarantee being that next year somehow everyone would want to do it all over again. It's the golden age of gadgets, blenders that sound like a jet engine, toasters with a personal vendetta, and an automatic can opener that weighs more than your dog. The kitchen is an altar to modern convenience, a museum of chrome and belite. Every appliance promises to save you time, though you'll spend most of it unclogging something or explaining to grandma why the electric knife keeps sparking. Let's open the cabinet doors and enter the 1950s kitchen, where innovation is measured in revolutions per minute, and every countertop gleams with futuristic promise. If you listen closely, you'll hear the constant whir, buzz, and mechanical hiccup of labor-saving devices, all straining at once. The blender stands tall, ready to turn anything, ice, fruit, the occasional spoon, into a frothy testament to mid-century optimism. It's as loud as a rocket launch and slightly more dangerous, sending milkshakes airborne if you so much as look at it sideways. The toaster is not just for bread. It's a daily gamble. Its settings range from barely thawed to apocalyptic charcoal, and it pops with the force of a small firecracker. Every breakfast is an experiment in physics and patience. As you try to retrieve your toast before it's launched across the kitchen or blackened into something that even the family dog won't touch, the electric can opener, meanwhile, is a beast of burden. Heavy, awkward, and determined to eat at least one label per week. It's progress, but it's progress with a catch. The pride of the kitchen is the automatic coffee percolator, a miracle of bubbling noise and unpredictable results. It promises the perfect cup, but what you get is anyone's guess. Sometimes bitter enough to remove paint, sometimes so weak even the kids turn up their noses. Mom swears by her stand mixer, a contraption with enough horsepower to churn butter and possibly mix concrete. Every attachment has a purpose, though no one is quite sure what half of them do. If you can survive the installation process without pinching a finger, you've passed the first test. Of course, the true badge of modernity is the deep freezer, a chrome-clad monolith squatting in the corner, humming with the energy of a small nuclear reactor. Inside, mysterious packages lurk. Stews frozen since the Eisenhower inauguration. Casseroles so icy you wonder if they're still technically edible. The freezer is both promise and threat. Promise of fresh food all year round. Threat of a surprise defrost that floods the kitchen with peas and regret. Let's not forget the gadget drawer, a junkyard of egg slicers, melon ballers, and corn cob holders, each purchased in a moment of hopeful inspiration. The gadgets claim to revolutionize everything from potato peeling to sandwich making, but most are just really good at getting tangled. If you dig deep enough, you'll find last year's fad, the electric knife. It's perfect for carving turkey and frightening the neighbors. But mostly, it's used to scare grandma into volunteering for the salad instead. Every new appliance is greeted with a blend of awe and trepidation. Dad demonstrates the ice crusher at cocktail hour, twice as loud as any music and 3 times as likely to jam. Mom explains to the family why the waffle iron is worth the counter space, even though it only gets used 3 times a year. When guests come over, the gadgets are displayed with pride. Would you like a pineapple ring? It's perfectly sliced. It's a moment of triumph right up until someone mentions the burnt toast or the blender incident of '54. The result, the kitchen becomes a stage for the relentless pursuit of efficiency, a word that mostly means complicated mess with more buttons. You spend hours mastering the gadgets, fixing the gadgets, and inevitably cleaning up after the gadgets. But for one shining moment, surrounded by chrome, you feel like you're living in the future, even if the future mostly tastes like burnt toast and jam can openers. If you have siblings, congratulations. You're in a Cold War of your own. Every day is a contest. Who gets the front seat? Who controls the TV? Who gets blamed for the mysterious stain on the couch? Alliances are forged and broken over Monopoly games and the last cupcake. And snitching is considered both a survival skill and art form. You learn that nothing says family quite like a headlock in front of the company. Let's set the scene. It's 1957, and your house is a battleground disguised as a home. Peace is a temporary ceasefire at best. Each morning starts with a race to the bathroom, a flurry of elbows and accusations about who used up all the hot water. Toothpaste is measured in fractions of an inch, and the towel rotation is monitored more closely than the nuclear arms race. You learn to brush your teeth quickly, to dodge flying socks, and to guard your cereal bowl with the intensity of a CIA operative protecting classified intel. At breakfast, the negotiation begins. Who gets a good glass? Who has to eat the heel of the bread? And who gets to sit closest to the radio? Mom tries to enforce order, but it's like refereeing a wrestling match between caffeinated raccoons. There's a silent agreement that whoever whines first has to clear the table, a rule universally ignored and endlessly disputed. The arms race escalates with the approach of the school bus. There's only one coveted front seat, and the fight for it starts before the car even leaves the garage. It's a sprint worthy of Olympic coverage, complete with last-second schvees, creative tripping, and the threat of nuclear retaliation. If you don't move, I'm telling Mom about the lamp you broke. On the bus, alliances shift again. Sometimes you're on the same side, especially if there's a greater threat, like the neighborhood bully or a rogue bus driver who ignores your stop. School is merely a timeout in the hostilities, but the competition resumes at sharp. The front door barely closes before the squabbling begins. Who gets first dibs on the TV? Who controls the sacred remote? A device so valuable, it's rumored to be handed down in the will. If a favorite show is on, the living room transforms into a war room. Threats are whispered, bribes exchanged. I'll do your chores if you let me watch Bonanza. And if things get really desperate, someone will promise not to tattle. Unless, of course, the stakes rise higher. Games and board. Games are particularly dangerous territory. Monopoly has a casualty rate matched only by medieval battlefields. Rules are adjusted on the fly. Pieces are hidden or mysteriously lost. And nobody ever really wins, at least not for long. Candyland is no safer. Someone always accuses someone else of cheating, and the loser gets to hold a grudge until the next birthday party. Victory is less about actual skill and more about psychological warfare. The kitchen is another theater of conflict. The last cupcake is a prize fought over with strategies that would make a chess grandmaster proud. You hide treats in the back of the fridge, label food with your initials, and develop a sixth sense for when Mom is baking, so you can stake your claim before the others catch on. Of course, accusations fly if the stash is discovered. Cue the dramatic denials and sudden bouts of helpfulness as everyone tries to get back in Mom's good graces. And through it all, there's the art of snitching. Siblings quickly master the delicate dance of tattling, just enough to win points. Never so much that you lose trust altogether. If you get blamed for the mysterious stain on the couch, your best defense is a counter-accusation or a plausible alibi. It was the dog. Definitely the dog. But for all the bruised elbows, slammed doors, and dramatic standoffs, there's a weird kind of camaraderie. You might fight like cats and dogs, but when the outside world intrudes, be it bullies, strict teachers, or the threat of a shared punishment, you're suddenly a united front. You laugh about your epic battles years later, swapping stories of sabotage and truce. In the end, the sibling rivalry arms race is just another way of saying your family, flawed, competitive, and secretly on the same side when it counts. Venture into the garage and behold the sacred domain of the incomplete. Here, Dad stores every tool known to mankind, boxes labeled MISK, and at least one appliance that hasn't worked since the Truman administration. You're forbidden to touch anything unless you want a 40-minute lecture on proper socket wrench technique. The garage is less a place for cars and more slum for Dad's abandoned dreams and your lost baseball glove. Let's approach with caution because the garage is not just a room. It's a microclimate of sawdust, motor oil, and unspoken family tension. The door opens with a squeal, and the first thing you see is the workbench. This altar is cluttered with half-empty coffee mugs, dull drill bits, tangled extension cords, and a mountainous pile of washers, bolts, and screws with origins lost to time. Above it, pegboards display tools in a system only Dad can decipher, arranged like a gallery for the Smithsonian's Department of Unfinished Endeavors. Every inch of the garage tells a story of ambition and distraction. There's the half-built bookshelf, started one Saturday, and abandoned when Dad realized he was missing the right kind of screws. There's the bicycle with a flat tire waiting for a miracle. The radio just needs a new tube, and the mysterious project car, currently a rusted chassis, surrounded by stacks of popular mechanics. The garage is a home for future plans, all waiting for that magical free weekend that never actually arrives. The floor is a hazard course of garden tools, paint cans, and the world's most optimistic stack of camping equipment. Each box of misc holds a treasure trove of forgotten Christmas lights, a hammer with a splintered handle, and leftover parts from things that have long since disappeared from the house. There are fishing rods tangled together like spaghetti, and always a lawnmower that starts only if you threaten it first. Dad presides over this kingdom with the solemnity of a priest and the suspicion of a detective. Any attempt to help, organize, or heaven forbid, throw something out is met with swift, passionate resistance. Don't touch that. I might need it. Put that back where you found it. Do you even know what a crescent wrench is? These are the mantras of garage life, delivered with the authority of a man who hasn't actually found the right wrench since 1948. And yet, despite the clutter, there's an order here. Dad can find a Phillips screwdriver in a pile of chaos in under 10 seconds. He knows exactly where the extension cord is, right behind a box of broken badminton rackets, and next to the leaky can of paint thinner. To the untrained eye, it's beat 'em. To Dad, it's the comfortable, unchanging landscape of his sanctuary. Every now and then, Dad invites you into his world. Come here, let me show you something, he says, guiding you through the maze of clutter to a project he started last spring. Maybe it's a birdhouse. Maybe it's a model airplane. Maybe it's a stack of wood that he swears will become a bookshelf any day now. For a few minutes, you see the garage through his eyes, not as a graveyard for good intentions, but as a testament to the thrill of possibility. There's a lesson buried under the piles of sawdust and half-used paint cans. Sometimes it's not about finishing, it's about tinkering, dreaming, and having a space where it's okay for things to be a little unfinished. The garage is Dad's retreat from the world of perfection and routines. A room where creativity and procrastination can live side by side, forever awaiting their moment of glory. So next time you lose your baseball glove, don't despair. It's somewhere in the great American garage, resting alongside 1,000 projects, all waiting for just the right afternoon and the right socket wrench to be finished. So here you are, having survived another day in the wilds of postwar suburbia, a landscape paved in linoleum, trimmed with picket fences, and echoing with the polite clatter of dinner plates and unspeakable jealous outlets. You've braved TV dinners, emotional repression, 3 different kinds of processed cheese, and a level of lawn care that borders on religious zealotry. Maybe you only lost a little dignity during the PDA bake sale, and your casserole once again came in a distant third. It's funny, isn't it? The world remembers the 1950s as a time of safety and simplicity. But for the people actually living it, life was a daily tightrope. Walk over a sea of unspoken anxieties, relentless optimism, and endless casserole. Every smile was practiced, every shirt was pressed, and every feeling, unless it could be resolved with a slice of pie or a martini, was quietly escorted back into the den. But here's the thing. Under all that forced cheer and institutional beige, there was real resilience. People endured. They learned to cope with nuclear duck and cover drills, mysterious casseroles, and existential dread disguised as a suburban block party. They kept the fires burning, the grass trimmed, and the Tupperware lids burped. Even when nobody was quite they sure what was supposed to go inside, they found ways to laugh, to gossip, to hope, and sometimes just for a second to actually relax. So tonight, as you settle down in your own bed with soft pillows and the knowledge that your fridge is not a potential biohazard, maybe give a quiet nod to those who came before, the ones who wore their hair high, their collars stiff, and their dreams tucked somewhere between the pages of a Sears catalog and the last page of the evening paper. Remember, history isn't just about what was endured, but how stubbornly, absurdly, and sometimes hilariously people insisted on making it through. Close your eyes. Let the white noise of vintage appliances lull you to sleep, and know that you're part of a long line of survivors. Each generation is odd, hopeful, and inexplicably fond of mayonnaise as the last. Good night. Sleep well, and may your dreams be free of Jell-O salad.